Before we begin, and those of you who are just coming in, I just made an announcement about laptops. If you could, put up your laptops, please, because it'll take up table space, and there's not anything for this session that you're going to need your laptop for. The reason we're doing cooperative learning, because as you know, from cohort 1, we were in a lot of classrooms, and it's just something that we decided as a team, from all the coaches and the feedback that we received from the teacher participants in cohort 1, something that we kind of collectively decided was needed and would be helpful. So that's why we're doing it today, so we know it's going to be something that is advantageous for everybody. So with that being said, Debbie is going to start us out.
Okay, we're going to talk today about cooperative learning, and cooperative learning is a research-based strategy. It's a pedagogy. I am not really going to talk about cooperative learning. I'm going to talk about the steps before cooperative learning, which is grouping of students. And I know that I've heard various ways that people have grouped students, and I think Paul said he groups all his highs together, and he does it according to ability grouping, and I've heard some other people do things. I did not have success with ability grouping of students. And so what I did, and if you got the handout over there, there's a handout which is like a little questionnaire for students, and it is really about their work habits, and I give them this questionnaire because I want kids to be metacognitive, understand how they learn and work and interact with others, because it's all part of the classroom. So I give them this little, and here it is here, Kathy, can I borrow yours? It looks like this. It has two little squares up in the corner, so I can pull out this sheet. I would give this to them in the beginning of the year, and I would also use my observations of them to collect information on them as workers. I want to know who my self-starters are. I want to know those kids who just, and there are always a lot of them in the classroom, or enough of them. They may not be the brightest kids in the world, but they like to get their tasks done. They want to know, what am I supposed to do? Let's get going. And they charge ahead. And then there are those kids who, yeah, they like to get their work done, but they need a little nudging. And then there are those kids who have all sorts of other problems. Either they can't get going, they can't finish, they can't do their work without somebody telling them what to do. Someone has to constantly redirect and assist them. Okay, so I look at those qualities of a student, and I ask them to answer these set of questions. And if you look at the questions there, like the first part 1 is really like, I get started right away and I keep working until I'm done. Does that describe you? Circle it. The next one, I take a few minutes, but once I get going, I keep going. I need help, but once I get started, I'll work until I'm done. I need help getting started, and I have trouble getting my work done. After a few assignments, you're probably going to have your own observations on this, but I want kids to be aware of that. You might have them do this paper and then numerically average their scores and put the score up there for you. I try and make kids understand that I'm taking their input, but then I have a place for my own score, and I am going to qualify that the way that I want to, or the way that I observe things, not the way that I want to. I'm using data. Some people have said to me, oh my God, you are crazy out of your mind. This is like a lot of work, and it's very time consuming. I don't have time for this. And it is true. It's time consuming, I'm not going to lie. But to me, it pays off, because what I have learned, and my good friend Ricky Harris, I'll quote from Schroeder, he always said to me, own the seating chart. It is one of your most powerful management tools, and act like even when you let kids seat themselves wherever they want, it was your decision. So make sure that you own that. And that's a fairly easy thing to do with middle school kids. Now with high school, you might have to massage that a little bit. But with middle school kids, that was fairly easy to do. And I just was looking for the best grouping of kids to get the highest amount of work from them, get them functioning at a high level where I knew that this was a good chemistry and combination for kids to work together. So yes, I did spend a little time on this, paid off in the long run. So if we can switch to the document thing for a second. I'll show you what I do with it afterwards. These are my best friends here. I love these things, these multi-purpose, this is like real old school, like these multi-purpose little labels that are removable. And if you flip on the back of that sheet, there's like a little seating chart. So I use these labels, I put their names on them, you can have them put their names on them if you want to save time. And then I code them. So if you look at the very top of the sheet, maybe we can just lower it a little bit. Exemplary work habits were purple. Green was slow starter but works. Yellow is a big category, like needs assistance and redirection. And some people I coded both ways, like, yeah, they're a little bit more toward the purple, but they are really green. Or they have two yellows, because they have multiple issues. Okay, you see how that works? And then I try my best to put people in groups that I think might work. So, like Evan here, he's a double whammy. But Lana and Tanya are real strong. They're like my real strong people, so I know they're going to corral him into getting his work done. Okay? And Samantha needs a little help. So I put two really strong people with two people who need a lot of redirection. And so that's kind of the way I did it. And then some people are like Philip here. He's a pretty strong person. Joseph's a real strong person. Donita needs some help. I have a nice group that looks like it'll work fine together. Greens, purple, and two yellows. Okay? So I'm looking for that combination. And usually after the first day, you know who you need to change, so I use these little removable labels and I just move them around. And then the next day I tell them what the changes are. So I worked on this really hard and it really, really helps. And I just wanted to share this with you. This is not cooperative learning. This is just grouping with students and how you think about grouping with students, because I think that's the preliminary step to cooperative learning. And then you're going to use cooperative learning strategies and teach them what their roles are, because we do not want the purple guy to do all the work. That's not the way grouping works. And the purple guy probably be very happy to do all the work. But that is not how, cooperative learning works. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in and show you what I did. This is a good opportunity to share what has worked for other people. Ability grouping did not do it for me, because I think that I find a lot of students that I used to get, by the time they got to me, they had holes in their education. It wasn't that they were, my son always would laugh at me because I lived in the community where my kids were, and I ran into my kids all over the place. At the library, the grocery store, whatever, and my son would always say to me, was he a good student? And I'd go, well, yeah, he's a really smart kid, but probably not the best student. And that was always my answer, because I had a million students like that, very bright, holes, either they weren't organized, or they didn't know how they learned, or they didn't do their homework, or something, but they're your students, and you got to figure out how you're going to use them in the classroom, get the most out of them, and make them productive students in the time that you have with them. You've got 45 minutes, an hour a day.
I use the site humanmetrics.com, and it tells you it's based on Myers-Briggs. But
Right.
then I have them just research themselves of what kind of learner am I, who do I work well with, who do I not work well with, and it just really forces them to kind of see that kind of stuff too, like about themselves.
That's an excellent idea.
But it's green.
And a lot of kids, what they'll do, I've seen a lot of teachers over the years do this. They'll write down one person I will not work with, or somebody I want to work with, and then I try to honor that as best I can, because you don't want people working together that don't want to work together. That would sabotage the whole learning environment.
Barb, what was the site that you said? Humanmetrics.com, and it's the JUNG Young personality test.
Myers-Briggs.
It's Myers-Briggs, but under that site, I say that. And then I just done research over a lot of it. They know all the, I'm the type of person that has the agenda laid out, or I like to, wing it, or rely on driving somebody else, not being involved, and they have to.
Right, exactly. I have found that kids are like that too, that when you have a system that they get used to, they like that. They like to have that routine. It makes your classroom feel safe because it's a part of your predictability. And a lot of my students don't have much predictability in their lives. So if they come to your classroom, you can be predictable to them. It gives them a certain sense of security. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. I'm done.
Okay. So Debbie has already told you today that we're making the distinction between grouping and cooperative learning. So you're going to learn the differences between the two, the key attributes of cooperative learning. You will also learn several cooperative learning structures and how to implement them in your classroom. So before we continue, what do you think the differences are between the two? When I go to this next slide, don't look at the slides, don't look at the handout. What do you think the differences are? And when I call on you, if you could say your first name first, because as you know, although we are coaches, we're not here every single day, so I feel like I'm still learning some names. So what do you think the differences are going to be if you have not read ahead? And Debbie kind of gave some, I think she gave some hints. Okay. Red shirt.
My first name is Aaron, and grouping is just like getting groups of students together, and cooperative learning is giving each of those students a task in that group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? White shirt.
Thomas, I think cooperative learning is like students are building ideas off of each other in the whoever they're working with.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so we got some ideas going already. Okay, this was the seating chart, the possible seating chart that Debbie showed you with the different clusters of students. She already gave you some suggestions as to how you might identify those students on your seating chart. So you might use a name label per student, which I've seen the labels on the table. That probably works better if you're in senior high, because as you know what's going to happen to those labels on the table. Removable labels on the seating chart, coding each student, change seating arrangements as needed. Of course, be patient and arrive at the best arrangement that maximizes cooperative learning. For math class, this is the arrangement that I favor the most. And the reason being, the red is like where my desk might be in the back of the classroom. And the reason I like this configuration is because when you want the students to work with a partner, they have a partner next to them and it's obvious who their partner is. If you want them to work in groups of 4, then one of these end people, I'll have them bring their chair around so the 4 people are facing each other. So it works out perfectly. And of course, some of you have different situations, like Jen has a room that has huge furniture, and so it makes it more difficult, but many of these configurations will be possible for most of you. Okay, so how many students should be in a cooperative learning group? I already gave a hint, between 2 and 4. What are the types of cooperative learning groups? Debbie has given some suggestions. Heterogeneous by achievement or by work habits. Homogeneous achievement. And as Debbie mentioned, cooperative learning research suggests that you use it sparingly and strategically. Otherwise, it could be self-fulfilling, meaning that if all your little kids get together, they're going to feel pigeonholed. They're going to realize, especially because we're all secondary people, they're going to be quick. It's not like they're kindergartners. They're going to be quick to realize we're the slow people or we're the high people and blah, 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 blah. So they kind of figure it out. Randomly, you can arrange them by interest, by choice, by gender, work habits, etc. So group assignments should be fluid. However you decide to do it, you don't want it to be the same on the first day of school as it is on the last day of school. And we're going to talk about some ways to make homogeneous grouping work. Because the whole reason we would to make heterogeneous work, the whole reason we might do homogeneous is, as you know, the first thing I heard people say was, yes, if you have high ability people in a group, the rest of the yellow people are going to let the purple and green people do all the work. So we're going to talk about some strategies so that that doesn't happen. Okay, so what is cooperative learning? Today, first of all, cooperative learning is just one of those terms, I won't say it's nebulous, but it's a term that has different meanings to different people. Today we're going to talk about Dr. Spencer Kagan's approach for the most part, and then I've added some personal tips and observations that I made through the years about cooperative learning. How many of you have heard of Kagan's approach to cooperative learning? Okay. If you have heard of it or have not heard of it, and you see it advertised in your district as professional development, I would highly encourage you to attend. I've heard nothing but good things. I was only able to go to like one session years ago, like a day-long session, but they offer week-long sessions. I know some of them are in Florida, sunny Florida. So if your district has the money to send you, and you have that opportunity, if I were you, I would seize that opportunity. And it seems initially like it would be sort of babyish stuff, but as we continue, you will see that it very much appeals to secondary students. So, cooperative learning, and there's a reason why there's a hot pie down there. There is a connection. Okay, cooperative learning, and I think I already heard, let me think, Aaron Thomas said something about interdependence and collaboration. It's positive interdependence. Groups function as a team with a common goal. Task requires cooperation. Individual accountability. Student receive individual roles, responsibilities, and grades. Equal participation. All students are engaged. The high achiever does not do all of the work. Simultaneous interaction. The students engage and collaborate with each other so they get this task. And the fact that you may or may not have already known, students gain more from what they say than what they hear. So that's all the research indicates. When you are speaking collaboratively, when you have to repeat something that you have learned, when you are teaching it to others, it reinforces what you've already learned. How many of you already knew that? Is that a practice that's easy to put in place? Even though we know that as teachers, is it something that is easy to deploy? No, because there's so many factors. If you have the kids talking, obviously you got to have a whole lot of classroom management routines and procedures in place because, as you know, that talking could lead astray. It could be too loud. It can result in a lot of other things. Okay. Okay, so positive interdependence, groups function as teams with a common goal. Tasks require cooperation. Look at our picture of our little ladies. What makes them a team? Look at that picture. When you look at that picture, how do you know that they are a team? Okay, uniforms. What does the uniform say? If you can see it, I'm not sure if you can see that from where you're sitting. Thunder. So they have a common name. What else? They're what?
They're smiling. They look like they're happy to be together.
They're happy to be together. What's in the girl's hand? A trophy and
Basketball.
so you know they have a common goal. Okay, so part of teaming, part of collaboration is for us to encourage team spirit. Create team names. That is like sharks, tigers, fly boys, hot girls. I said hot girls, but I don't know, that's kind of questionable. A lot of kids would think of some names. Consider having the teams dress alike or wear the same color on presentation day. Make comments to encourage teamwork, like 2 heads are better than 1. There's no I in team. I like the way the sharks are working together and using inside voices. I just heard a shark ask another shark an excellent question. Frequently address the team by their names. Now I already said that, so I said it twice. Why? Because it's important. Okay. Insist, and this is in the different colors. Insist that students collaborate. If one student raises a hand, ask another student what the group's question is. If the second student doesn't know, that means the group has not collaborated. So if I come over here, and Gabrielle, Gabria, thank you, has her hand raised.
Glenn.
I'm gonna go to Glenn. Say, oh, what's your group's question? Because if he doesn't know, what does that indicate?
Mom didn't talk about it.
She hasn't asked him. And they're a team. There's no I in team. He shouldn't, if she has a question, he should have been her first go-to person. Consider giving team rewards like works tirelessly, best collaboration, quick starters, highest average score, highest total score. So again, the I was individual accountability. So let's say I have given an assignment, this group was expected to work together collaboratively, and if you add up their scores, they have the highest total score, I might give them an award for their project, whatever it is. Oh, and I also might have the principal announce them. Like once they do their presentation, your groups are going to take, for some of you, weeks to work on their units. So it is a big deal when they finish their units, present their units. Why not have the principal announce, and Miss So-and-so's first bell, the Tigers were awarded, I wouldn't announce all of them, but maybe have a few select awards announced, like the highest total score or the hardest workers, whatever works best for you. When questioning, sometimes call on teams rather than individuals. But if I'm going to call on a team, I already said I want the team to not know who I'm going to go to. So, but give the teams wait time to collaborate first. Don't always call on the hand raiser. Okay, so if Kevin raises his hand, I might call on Kevin, but I might not. Everybody else in Kevin's group should also know what the answer to the question is. Yes?
This is my question. So. I have something that kind of goes along with this. I found online. I didn't make it up, but it's a smartboard presentation. You could use it if you don't have a smartboard too. But they have like little sections for each team of how you group your class, and you just slide over. You guys are arguing. You guys are all in chaos, and it's just visual. You never say a thing. And you just slide it over, and they can see, oh, she knows that we're fighting right now. One person's doing all the work, and you just slide it over, and it's a really cool, it's something I found online. I can share
That sounds cool because then it's nonverbal.
it's nonverbal, it's completely nonverbal, and you could like make up your own things like that. But you basically just set up little things, like however you design your room, and you just slide it around. You can even put your team name on it. It's already made up, I can share it.
Maybe you give us all those websites, Barb, and we'll email them.
Yeah, if you send it to me, Barb, I'll send it to everybody else.
And I wanted to add too, if you can remember, like rewind back to the day that we did the, that Kimmy and I were presenting, remember the hands? They were a cooperative learning activity in this, or cooperative learning strategy in the sense that I asked all like the purple hands to put their hands up, and then I asked somebody within that group. It was a way for me to keep track of not calling on the same person over and over again, and making sure that each group knew that somebody was going to be accountable within that group when they got called upon. So it was a way of kind of spreading the accountability around, making sure that you're maximizing the group being involved.
And you can occasionally, when you are questioning, and then you're having the kids give you a group response, you can occasionally write all the teams on the board and give them points, or however it is you want to do it, just saying, continue the encouragement.
Let me just also say that cooperative learning and developing the climate for it takes time. Probably about, first couple of months of school. It is not something that you can just go in and do today and then drop it and then think you're going to come back to it when you do unit 2 or something. It's something that you really set up intentionally, and the kids are aware of it, and they know that all those things, the P, the I, the E, and the S, are really important, and you are paying attention to it. That's why Barb's suggestion with that thing that she saw online was, so important, because you can see it.
And even if you don't have a smartboard, you could put like little strips on magnets and just put it in there, something magnetized.
Great idea.
Yeah, I love that, because I usually like walk around and say, I like what the Tigers are doing, they are on task, blah, blah, blah. But I like that even better because it's not disruptive, and they can just look up and see where they are.
I'm looking at
And
that.
it helps them to self-monitor, which is part of what you're trying to get kids to do.
So, minutes, you have a purple piece of cardstock. Make a name tag with your team's name. And of course, make sure it's appropriate for school. Thank you, Purple Unicorns. It looks like you're complete. Thank you, Engineering Flamingos. And SQ plus M equals learning. Oh my goodness. That's our purple group. Thank you. Okay, fantastic. And the 3+1, this is great. As I was circulating, Katie asked a very good question about grade level. The Cincinnati Bengals, how old are they? Old. Have you ever seen some grown, big, beer-belly men? Bengals, yeah. So is the team name, is it age specific? It seems like, I think we like to think a lot of things are elementary, but do high school kids like them just as much? Think about who you see in the stands at a Bengals game. And I could think about a teacher at Schroeder. We all taught together, if you guys didn't know that. A teacher who was at Schroeder who used to say, it's a great day to be a Jaguar. And I used to think, that is so annoying. Every morning, great day to be a Jaguar, great day to be a Jaguar. But it increases school spirit, and the kids loved it. And the athletes loved it. This is in a high school environment. They loved it. And I'm not saying they need to have, little cutesy things that go along with it or whatever, but it builds team spirit. And in our country especially, people of all ages love to be on teams. Okay, so individual accountability. We're going to maintain individual accountability within your groups. Students will receive individual roles, responsibilities, and grades. There will be no hiding. So as you can see, no one is going to creep into their turtle shell, and nobody's going to get to hide behind the clouds. The roles are going to depend on the task at hand. Some possible roles, and your roles are going to change. You probably won't be able to, at the secondary level, you're not going to be able to have the same roles all the time because your activities are going to vary so greatly. So some possible roles could be recorder, materials monitor, checker, measurer, spy, instruction repeater, speaker, and most of those are obvious except for spy. I can tell you, you're going to use the spy when, let's say they're working on a task, you might give 2 minutes of spy time. Because let's say one group is really doing something great and another group is really missed the boat. They missed it completely. They're doing something that's so ridiculous that it's going to affect everything that they're doing. It's going to make their project wrong. It's going to make their whatever just simply not work. Allow them 2 minutes to send out a spy, a group representative, to just kind of go around and see what everybody else is doing. And allowing them to have a spy means that all the kids are not up at the same time. Because in your classroom, you're probably going to have, depending on how many kids you have, you might have 6, 7, or 8 groups. That means you only have 6, 7, or 8 kids up at a time. Or you might only allow one spy from each group up at a moment. Or the kids might even say, can we send out a spy? So let them, if they need to send out a spy, sometimes they need to send out a spy. And because they're sending out that one person, and you set up the parameters, like when you spy, you can't take paper with you. You can just spy on your own. That means they can't go over and write down exactly what the other group is doing. Okay? Groups might also decide on roles based on many topics. For example, a group researching transportation of water might divvy out assignments. Each might research a different mode of transportation. Like one of Doug's groups did transportation of water from Lake Victoria in Africa to a remote village in Africa. So the kids had to decide what was the best means of transportation. So when they're researching, one kid might be responsible for ground transportation like trucking, for researching that. Another kid might be responsible for researching how much it costs or what the logistics are of flying water, even though we know that's ridiculous. They don't know that. Another might investigate piping it in. So whatever the kids decide, they might each have a different responsibility, and they might decide on those responsibilities. That might not be a task that you divvy out. Secondary kids can come up with different mini topics for themselves, and then they record who is responsible for researching what. The roles should again rotate regularly. And role assignments can be based on seating, random, or even clothing. For example, the person facing the whiteboard is the recorder today, or the person wearing the most blue is the materials monitor. Okay. Role assignments should be posted prominently. So if it's something you've assigned, I would suggest that you post it, and then there's no confusion when the kids like the materials monitor. If you want somebody specific, if you know that that's going to be a role for that day, you might post it so that everybody knows who it's going to be, so as soon as they come in, they can get their materials out. Each student must submit their own copy of critical assignments. Work must be in their own handwriting. Give more weight to assignments that are done in class versus homework. Consider allowing groups a few minutes of team time to collaborate before submitting individual assignments. So if you're seated like this, and I am promoting or encouraging cooperative learning daily, but I have a task that I want you to do as individuals, and let's say the task or the quiz or whatever it is takes 30 minutes, I might give you the last 1 minute to collaborate. But of course the rule is everything on your paper has to be in your own handwriting. Like you can't, so one person, Gina can't hand her paper over to the next person and let them correct it. Everything on one person's paper has to be in her or his handwriting. If the assignment requires that only one document be submitted, give each group several colored markers, pens, or pencils. Ask students to write a key who wrote in each color. So if you think there's going to be some dishonesty, give them colored pencils, markers, or whatever, or even high school kids, somebody might have a red pen, a blue pen, even though I prefer that they don't write in pen. In a math class, they still have them. Somebody's going to have a pencil, whatever, so that they're all not writing with the same color utensil, so that there is some accountability as to who is writing and what. Have students record their own work before collaborating or coming up to consensus with their groups, and that's what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to do conservation conscious. Yes.
Question.
Maria.
Can I go back to the part where you were saying assign individual, like on the mode of transportation, have one or divvy out like through researches. How do you get up a situation where maybe one person is not, their research is not up to par?
It is going to, it might affect, but you're going to give them individual grades. So if that affects, unless that, whatever they assign was critical to the decision, like let's say, I don't know, if you're transporting water and you think the team's decision is going to be the most efficient way is probably piping. So you're saying if the person who's doing piping it in doesn't realize that, then you would just go with whatever mode that the kids decide, but they're still getting individual grades. I would not give a group grade. They're getting individual grades. And just for that reason, even though they're working together as a group, I would still give individual grades. And giving group grades has its own issues. Some of you have been teaching for a while. As a teacher, I experienced a lot of pushback from parents with group grades. Group grades are fine. Like if you have the purple, green, and yellow together, then the group ends up getting the purple grade. Whoever the purple kid is, that's the grade that they end up getting. So then you don't get as much pushback if you do it like that. But if you have the purple, the green, and the yellow, and the yellow person was doing something critical or didn't do what they're supposed to be doing, and the purple kid now gets a C, you get parent pushback. And so I've just determined individual grades makes everybody accountable, and you don't get all of the pushback, the flack from parents.
But however, there was a time, but things change over time. When this whole thing around group grades was really the thing to do, because they thought that would be some kind of incentive for cooperative learning. But there were so many issues around it that the main opinion today is to move away from the group grade, because you do have a lot of problems with it. However, if you can work it, and you have the environment, and you set that environment up, and you know it's going to work, I say go for it. But I do think that, in general, it's a problem.
Okay, now, we're gonna have a lot of questions and we have a lot to cover, so I'll answer one or two, and then I'm gonna have you guys go ahead and start the activity, and then I can come around and answer questions then too. Katie?
Presentation.
Uh-huh,
Group presentation,
uh-huh.
still individual.
I would still give individual grades. Yeah. Another thing too with presentations, which is not a part of this project, but just something I'll share with you that I've learned through the years, especially as a math teacher. This whole idea, it's a shift in mindset having kids present in a math class, and you're used to doing it in a language arts class, and one thing I learned from a language arts class that was so incredibly helpful is when a group of kids or a single kid is presenting, have the audience fill out some sort of evaluation. Even if it's just a little checklist, have the kids in the audience do something so that they're assessing the presenters, and their attention will be undivided. When they have the opportunity to assess, evaluate, cut up, or give feedback to, positive strokes to their classmates, they love it. And it could just be a little half sheet that says the person had poise, they made eye contact, the math information they gave was correct, their solution makes sense, whatever you want it to be, something simple. And of course, tell them that you're going to grade them, that it's a part of their own grade, how accurately they assess their peers. Wonderful. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to share what our biology professor did for participation, because I've always had participation be part of a grade when I take a group grade, but it's always a small part, kids really don't care. She had all of us evaluate what percentage of the work each of us did and have a justification for why we said that. And then when she averaged all of my peers' assessment of me, if I only got 75% of the participation grade, I only got 75% of the group grade. So if the group grade got 100%, I would still only get 75%. And I thought that was much more effective than the way I would do it. And I have done it, I should say. And it really makes them responsible. If they don't do their work, they're still not going to get the grade. Even if everybody else does their work for them, those people get the grade.
And I like that idea because it makes them accountable to each other, so that the opinions of their group mates count when they all have a stake in it, and they're going to decide who gets what percentage.
And nobody's hiding, you can't hide it.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's another situation where students are working together, the teacher will tell them, I'm only going to grade one out of the solution of everybody in the group. So that tells the students, we need to make sure that everybody in the group has this in their entirety, so everybody's grade is equivalent.
And hopefully you heard James's strategy as well, and I think that's another excellent one. You want to do, because grading every single thing is sometimes not feasible when you're in a high school and you have 150 students. So randomly selecting a student, however you want to do it so that everybody has some individual accountability. Okay, so if you could look at your problem that says, looks like this, conservation conscious. It's the problem on the bottom. On the table. If you didn't get one there on the table as you enter, okay, now, what you're going to do is you're going to come and this is your consensus map. So on each table you have one of these. It's divided in 4 sections. And as you notice, the one up there has a red oval in the middle. So if you could draw, somebody could draw an oval in the middle. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, each of you, as it says in the red at the top, each of you is responsible for recording your response to the conservation conscious in your rectangle. Now, because we have roaming eyes, you are going to use your cooperative learning pamphlet, you're going to need 2 of them, to conceal your response. So just put it up in the corner like that, put the other one up, then everybody can see what the other people are writing. I might need another one. Okay, then get busy. You are doing a conservation conscious problem. Oh, and you are gonna need a calculator, so you get out your cell phone and use your calculator that's on, if you don't have a separate calculator, feel free to use your cell phone calculator. You'll probably need a calculator, rather, I should say. Everybody might not need one, but I did probably. Okay, I'm gonna stop you so you can freeze again. Thank you. Okay, and the idea again is not necessarily the mathematics, but it's the cooperative learning. So, part of our pies was for me as a teacher to select something that required interdependence. This assignment, the way that I instructed you to do it, did it require interdependence with your partner? Right, because before you could do your own work, you and your partner had to decide what matched up with what. Okay, so if I had given this to an individual, I could have just as easily given this problem to an individual, but if I want to encourage collaboration, I have to deliberately select problems that require interdependence. And this does, because you have to match it up before you can even do your explanation. Further with the editing, the same thing. If you have your assignments on 2 different sheets of paper and each of you is accountable for your own assignment on your own sheet of paper, I will be able to see if the other person actually edited or not at a quick glance. That's the whole reason why you're writing with 2 different utensils or 2 different colors. I probably would just give you, in a math class, I would just have colored pencils in the middle of the table, sharpened colored pencils. Or, and I've even seen mechanical colored pencils, which work even better because you don't sharpen them. They're kind of expensive. So, do you get the idea of how this would encourage collaboration? Okay. Do you want to know what the actual answers are? I can see some of you are still working diligently. Okay, A certain Ferris wheel makes 2 circular loops. The height you are, wait a minute, I hear some conversations, so I'll wait, because I don't want to strain my voice. Thank you. The height you are above the ground is related to the length of time you are on a ride. There's a clue in here. In A, there's a clue that lets you know it can only possibly be 2 of these graphs. There's a numeric clue. What's a numeric clue in A? 2. So if you look at the graphs, you know it has to have something that shows 2. Which one is it? A is graph 3. Okay, B. Groups of people often volunteer to pick up trash in public parks. The number of people picking up trash is related to the length of time needed to complete the job. So the number of people picking up trash is related to the length of time needed to complete the job. First of all, time is usually always on which axis? Okay, so if we know time is going to be on the x-axis and the number of people, so if we're picking up trash, is the number of people going to increase or decrease with time? Right, so which one do you think it is? Okay, 2. Is your hand up for a question or comment?
A comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to respectfully disagree because I think that the dependent variable is the time. It should have gone the x-axis because the graph is showing the completion of the job. The more people, the less time will take.
Okay.
People should be on the x-axis.
So we like dissension. So we're going to hold your dissension, and then we're going to do C and D, and then we'll come back to your argument. Okay, C. When exercising, it is important to warm up and then cool down. Your heart rate while exercising is related to the length of time you exercise. So heart rate and time. We said time is usually always on which axis? X. And that's because, as you know, time keeps going no matter what. So that's why time is usually, time is independent. Okay, so which one do you think that's going to be? Okay, when exercising, it's important to warm up. So then you work out and you warm up, like when you do Zumba, you do your little things, then you do Zumba, and then you go back to the stretches. So which one is that going to be? 1, okay. Last but not least, D, the height of water in a bay rises and falls with the tide. Tides, plural. The height of water is related to the time of day. So which one do you think that is? 4. Okay. So then we go back to B, which I think was a good argument. But does time ever stop technically?
In this situation, the job will get done.
Okay. So, but does that change our choice?
It doesn't change.
Right. Doesn't.
I just want to
Okay.
make sure.
Very few.
Okay. But even if we switch them, like look at the graph or two. Even if we switch the axes, would it change the graph? This graph.
No, but it just doesn't make sense that way. Say that. The more time passes, less people.
Okay.
You're having a job.
But they're volunteers.
You have one person trying to clean out, some people.
So the further, basically the further distance.
Should the graph then be going, you think it should be going straight
No,
up?
look at how it goes. It should be labeled.
No, it's
Versus the graph, they want to switch.
Time is.
It was confusing.
But for number 2, since the answers, the matching is not labeled, could we switch it and would it matter? Like I just said which one I thought was independent and independent, but if I switched it, would it matter? Because they're not labeled here, so it would matter. Okay.
Still the same graph.
And now, and with this activity, again, we talked about the whole pods, the interdependent. You also have your Kagan structures, which are in front of you. And Kimya, in your packet, you have these 2 pamphlets. This one gives some summaries of different Kagan structures, and they're very brief summaries with little, cute little cartoons, I guess that's what you want to call them. On the handout that we gave you, it gives you a little bit more detail, and it adds a few Kagan structures that are not in the pamphlet. And Kimya is going to demonstrate one of them for you, which is called jigsaw. And you probably, some of the Kagan terms, Kagan has been around enough that some of their terms and terminology are used loosely in other contexts. So you probably heard jigsaw before, you probably heard rally robin, you probably heard round robin, and they're all originally from Kagan. So Kimmy's going to demonstrate jigsaw for you.
The units that you all are doing, in most cases, what we saw a lot of last year was teachers were putting their students in groups, and then the groups would do their work and then do a presentation. In some cases, some of the groups would get their work done, but we would run into some of the similar group problems where one person didn't know what he was doing and he would do all the work. So we're going to talk about one of the Kagan structures called jigsaw that might help prevent that might help allow more students to participate within your groups. When you have jigsaw, what you're really doing is allowing students to become an expert on a particular aspect of whatever it is that you're doing. So if we use the example that I started a couple weeks ago, the code example, where we were trying to, where we had the fashion show, we developed the code, and we didn't have time to go further with that. On your tables, there should be 4 pieces of graph paper that look similar to this. And if you would look at that, I'm just going to sort of summarize what we did in that particular activity so that you can see how you can use the jigsaw. At the top of the paper, it says, "With liberty and justice for all." That was the name of the unit that I was given, called "With liberty and justice for all," referring to the animals and using animals for the fashion industry. Under that, you see house up, because just as you chose names for your groups today, what we would have done in that particular activity was ask you to come up with a name for your fashion company, the house up. And this over here, is still here. You all chose some of those, house ups. If you remember those. House ups. House of Boss. Good? You all remember that now? Anyway, what we were trying to do in that particular activity, if you look at the bottom of the sheet of that graph paper, there are 6 things. There's 6 different, I want to say, activities that needed, that math work that needed to be done for that unit to be complete. One thing was you wanted to predict the number of oscillates, and remember I was using this little stuffed animal as my example, and we were trying to figure out how many oscillates would it take to make the coat that you had designed. And so I was going to ask initially, at the start of the unit, to predict the number of oscillates that would be used for the original coat that you designed. That would be the first thing that you do. And you would do that as a group. The second thing that you would do is to determine the area of your coat. You all had a fashion show. You developed your coat. Well, what is the area of your coat? In order to find out the number of oscillates that it would take to make your coat, you have to know what is the area of the coat. So in order to do that, in order to do number 2, in order to figure out how many oscillate pellets it would take for your coat, in order to determine the number of oscillates it would take for your coat, all I'm doing is going down the list of questions on the graph paper that I gave you. What I'm asking you to do is to look at that paper and you see a dot, a colored dot on each paper. And so what I would do is to say, all those in your groups who have the red dots, I'm not asking you to do this, but if I were doing it in class, all those in the red dots, I want you to sit over here. And that would be one person from each group. They would come and they would sit here. All those with the blue dots would come and sit here. All those with the green dots would come and sit here. All those with yellow dots would come and sit here. And then what I would do is to say, okay, red dots, you're all coming from different groups. You all had different coats, right? What you have to do as a red dot group is to find the area of your coat. For the blue dots, if you're sitting here, then I would ask you, figure out of an oscillate, how much of an oscillate can we actually use? And I gave you that on the day we did the activity. In that packet, I think on the last page, was that which is on the overhead, this graph that shows that if this is a layout of the oscillate, just this amount here would be the amount that is usable to actually use for a coat. So how many square centimeters is that? So the blue group would figure that out. Then I forgot the other colors that I said, green group, whatever it is. The green group would perhaps research animal rights. And the yellow group would research, are there alternatives to using animals for fashion? What other alternatives are out there? What is the fashion industry doing? And they would do that research. And so once you spend the red group doing its work, the blue group doing its work, the green group, the yellow group, and so forth, doing its work, then they come back together, now back in your own groups, then if he is the red person, he's got the answer to the area of the code. She's got the answer to how many pelts it took. You've got the answer to what about animal rights? You've got the answer to alternative rights, alternatives to fur, or alternatives to using animals for fashion. Now you have all the information as a group that you need to complete the project. And everybody participated, and everybody, or each person then becomes the expert. Now, when you were over here with this group, you may not have known what you were doing, but you had all the other reds over there that you could bounce off of to get some information from. Do you follow what I'm saying? So it's a way, a jigsaw is a way in which it forces everybody to participate. And then they come back, and then they, they somebody, because you're going to have to depend on them. They got some information. And if they are that person that just doesn't do well and doesn't know much, well, they can get some information from the other people in that group. So it sort of empowers that the cake and structure of jigsaw can sort of empower the students. So they come back, and now, even though they don't know that 2 and 2 is 4 on most days, they do know something that's going to help them get through this particular unit.
I just have a question, and this is completely out of ignorance. I noticed like in your tasks, some of them were math related and some were not. Some were doing research. Would you, as a teacher, strategically pick some kids to do the math task and other kids to do the other task? And if so, how would you do that? Or would you literally just do it randomly?
It depends on how you decide it. That's again part of the whole thing around cooperative learning. You have to make some decisions as a teacher because you know your students.
Right.
And in some cases, it may not matter. With this particular group, it may not matter who goes where.
Right.
But in this particular group, I really want him to work with somebody over here because he needs that particular skill. So I just would.
Yeah, make it work that way.
Yeah, you know how you have to sort of.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have any questions on Jigsaw? Do you sort of get how we can use Jigsaw? I really feel like, especially the way that we've seen the units go last year, I really feel that Jigsaw is a nice way to encourage and make sure that all students do participate. Yeah.
I've used Jigsaw before and I felt like it wasn't successful.
Okay.
Now, it might have been because of how I used it. Like when I used to teach 6th grade, we did the 3 types of rocks. So you'd have one group that would work on Thursday, one group, and then go back to the group and they created the poster. Everybody had their own parts. But it seemed like they only knew their part. So so when you do Jigsaw, how do you make sure that everybody, and even I did it with the walls of motion when I taught that. Each group got a different, the expert group went and worked on the first wall, then they came back to the group and they created their project and shared it with their group. But it seemed like if it was their one that they were an expert in, they knew it, and in the other 2, they didn't know it. So how do we make sure that when we use Jigsaw that everybody, when you go back to your group, you are the expert, but then you also make them expert?
That's an excellent question, and I think that really becomes incumbent upon the teacher and the design of the unit itself. Because not only are they sharing or putting in their particular part, you're right. If you got to make a poster, okay, I'm going to do my little piece right over here, and I've done it, and nobody else knows what they did. Then you've got to design the unit so that there is a requirement that they know what she did and she knows what he did. Just like Lori was talking about in the whole group, you have to collaborate within that group, and that's the environment and the climate that you've got to develop from day one. So if you decide that you want to use cooperative learning, it's not just using it one time. It's like something that you're really going to have to work on so that they really understand this is the culture of this classroom. And I am expecting everybody to know everything. So the test that you give is not just going to be on your part. The test that you give, or the assessment, is going to be on what everybody did. And in this particular case, when you came back with the area of your coat and you came back with how much of the oscillate, of one oscillate, then the whole group has to use both that information to determine how many oscillates are going to have to be killed in order to make your particular coat. And then remember, in this particular unit, then after we see that it's going to take 50 oscillates for your original coat, then the redesign process says, well, let's redesign this coat so that we can use less. Or how, or what is it that we can do so that we will have less of an effect on the animal family. Somebody else, I thought I saw somebody else. Yes. Tell me your name.
I encountered a similar problem when I tried to do jigsaw, so the next time that I did it, when the other students came back and taught their group members, the kids who were listening had guided notes to fill in, and then they had like an application activity where they'd do it on their own. So that way, they had something to fill in, and then they also had a problem to work out on their own as well with practice.
Yeah, so it's, the whole thing about designing the unit is critical, so that you make sure that everybody's participating. Yes.
I think one of the times where I learned the best using a jigsaw was when we did the wind turbines in our foundations class with Michelle. I knew exactly what all the other groups had learned because I needed that, or our group needed that piece of information in order to perfect their wind turbines. So they have like the challenge piece in there that requires them to apply.
And to use, so you've got to use that information as part of that. And the other piece also was in this packet that I gave you on the unit, the pre and post test required information from all those. Any other questions? Does anybody have any comments that they'd like to make on the use of cooperative learning in their classes? Because we were not assuming that nobody knew anything about cooperative learning. I'm sure that many people have had experience with cooperative learning. Does anybody have any good experiences or problems that they want to bring up?
They don't have them. The thing that helped me, because I use it sometimes and sometimes not with groups, was these neon cards that said what each individual group member, what their role was. And I always posted on the board and on the back of it, it said what the role was. But that helped me when I was going around. There was one speaker, and the speaker was the only one that was allowed to communicate with me. And that, some of them really hated that, but it was something to make, shifting that role around helped them collaborate.
And that's important, because you don't want one person to have that role.
You give them the neon cards?
Yeah.
That was like their name?
When they came in, they got them in groups and just went around and had them pick up a pile of them.
And then they
Cards, and I would tell, okay, the person closest to that corner has the speaker today, that one has the facilitation.
I guess I get from, I think, Debbie Silver. I used to have different color index cards at each, like 4 different color index cards at each table. And then I had a chart up that had the 4 different group roles. And I had laminated cards of those colors each Monday. I just had it velcroed up for each Monday. We'd switch the color to each role.
Nice.
Each person, I guess they sit in the same room for about a quarter. So each week, each person had a different role. And then all you have to do is change the on board.
Were the cards stuck to the desk?
Yeah, and so then when they changed, like, so that they were pink this quarter, when they got a new seating assignment, then they'd be yellow the next quarter, but then they just looked at the board and see what role they had for that week. And, by the end of the year, when we were doing anything cooperative, they'd look at me like, oh, okay, I'm the group leader this week, or whatever.
So it's establishing that role.
Yeah.
So they knew what to do. Good. Good. That change up is good, so that they don't get stuck in one thing.
I would also add that, I think that Schroeder, the
when I was in Alicia's classroom, I would hear, ask 3 before me. That was that line. If she got to a table and kids would finally go, what are you asking her for? She's not gonna answer your question. So they got it. You know, after a while, she is not gonna answer your questions, might as well do what she's saying to do. So it was always ask 3 before me, and they knew that that's what they were going to hear. If you went over to the table and you hadn't asked each other the questions, they were going to, that was the little pat line that they were going to receive. And the other thing was what Paige mentioned. In my classroom, there were jobs for everything, because after teaching like a couple of years of doing labs several times a week, I would come home like a drip on the floor. And I realized that I can't continue doing it that way, that I had to have people who did things for me in the classroom, that the kids were perfectly capable of helping me clean up and set up and all this kind of stuff. But it does take a lot of organization, and you have to teach people how to do the job properly. And I even had attendance takers in my class. I got a whole list of jobs that people would keep for a quarter. Because I did take attendance, I was responsible for doing that, but it didn't hurt that somebody taking attendance behind me, so that I knew that if they didn't match, one of us was wrong, you know, so. And it gave, you know, I'd always say it has to be somebody who's here every day, you know, that kind of thing. So having kids be involved in jobs in your class really helps, takes a burden off of you quite a bit, and especially if you have a class that involves doing a lot of activity and disseminating materials and all that kind of stuff. It makes life a lot easier. Anybody else have some ideas to share?
I have a non-related comment. We still have a little bit of pizza left. I don't want to, please finish it or take it with you. So.
I think these structures are really neat. If you look at these, and the back is particularly good because it gives you some of the skills that you can really hit on as you pick different structures to use. I like Think, Pair, Share. It's not even on here, but Think, Pair, Share was the one that we had modeled in that very first activity. Mix, Pair, Share. Some of these are really good. And talking chips, if you do a lot of class discussions, talking chips is great because kids dominate. You have that kid who just never shuts up.
I think I'm gonna go to the house and see how they're doing.